Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Black Tower Podcast. My name is Aaron.
And my name is Andrew.
And today we're going to talk about some dark friends.
Oh, yeah.
Before we get started, I just want to say that this episode does contain selected portions of several books from the Wheel of Time series. If you have not read the entire series, you are in danger of being spoiled.
I don't mean spoiled in the good way. So we're going to introduce this subject with a quote from our main man, Rand al'Thor. So here's your quote. "He ravaged my home because it was my home. He brought Trollocs to kill my friends because they were my friends. He is a dark friend and a dead man."
That's right. We're talking about Padan Fain, the dark friend to top all dark friends. Gollum has nothing on my man Padan Fain. This is one evil bastard. And to my mind, the physical embodiment of the Dark One's taint.
Just like a roaming, super dark asshole. It's like, dude, you haven't wiped in like 30 years. That's how much of a taint you are.
Just smearing the Dark One's evilness everywhere he goes.
Oh, it's like a dog with worms.
Oh, yeah. Just dragging his butt all over the carpet, and you're like, cut it out.
Stop it now, damn it. Oh, so before we get directly into Padan Fain and start looking at him through the series, found some interesting kind of trivia bits about the origin of Fain outside of his origin in the story. So come to find out, Padan Fain was actually almost called Nickel Fain, Nikel, but Robert Jordan changed his name while editing the test manuscript for The Eye of the World. You can actually see pictures of the original manuscript for The Eye of the World, where Robert Jordan crossed out Nickel and wrote Padan. So when you take his name with Aram, our guy from the Traveling People or the Tinkers, Fain and Aram's name come from Padan Aram, which was a kingdom in ancient Mesopotamia. As already mentioned, he is a close parallel to Gollum for the Lord of the Rings, and it hails back to the relentless pursuit of a character, as well as the theme of transformation by evil being the main similarities. Though, if you saw the picture that we tweeted out with the podcast Twitter, you can kind of see almost that Gollum-like fascination and obsession with his physical characteristics. He's also a parallel to a character, Mordred, out of the Arthurian, like King Arthur legends. Of course, his name is similar to one of Fain's aliases that we'll get into later, Mordeth. And Mordred was a traitor to King Arthur, and during their last battle actually fatally wounded Arthur, which, like we'll get into later, is similar to the way that Mordeth left Ran with that never healing wound during one of their encounters. So I found that out, and I thought that was pretty interesting to bring some Tolkienian and some older, mythology to compare with Padan Fain. I'm also trying to say a lot less, and it's not working out terribly well so far.
Right. You don't realize how much you say certain words until you start doing a podcast. Words like and
I mean, some people think it makes me sound sophisticated like Obama.
We can change it.
And you can help us. Anyway, so the first place we meet Padan Fain, of course, is in The Eye of the World, chapters 2 and 3. We come across Rand and Matt have arrived. Well, Rand has arrived in Edmondsfield, and his father Tam is talking with Bran Al'Vir, the mayor of Edmondsfield. And he's tasked Rand, and once he sees Matt kind of hiding by the cart, he's tasked them both with unloading I believe it was brandy, the cask of brandy from the cart.
And hard cider.
And hard cider. You can't forget that hard cider. And then they throw rocks at what you think is an innocent bird, but in any other situation, we'd be kind of disturbed because we realize, as we learn later on, that ravens are really the Dark One's eyes. It's actually called a parallel to how oddly the bird just shifts out the way. And the two boys kind of look at each other like, what the fuck? Birds
Yeah,
don't do that. They fly away because they're pussies.
they definitely have a moment where they're just sitting there looking at each other like, why is that bird still standing there?
Yeah.
Which doesn't have much significance for us the first time we read it, but afterwards we kind of, oh, that's why that bird just pulled a baller power move and just stepped out of the way.
Maybe he's just doing like the cha cha slide.
Oop,
Slide to the left.
to the left. That's how we flow.
Becomes more important when we find out exactly who Padden Fane is. So, anyway, they meet. They see Nynaeve, of course, and uh, they've kind of encountered. At this point, no, they hadn't encountered Moraine yet. But the usual peddler arrives, and this is always a celebrated cause in Evansfield. People like the Traveler,
Well,
like,
I'm sorry, but I do think that when they throw the rocks at the um, the Raven, that Moraine sees them do it
oh
and
yeah,
makes some kind of comment,
fly away. I thought that, and then I second guessed myself and changed my answer to the test question.
and that's when she starts handing out coins to teenage kids.
Here, little boy, come and talk to me. Here's a silver coin. It's our own version of like a candy house from Hansel and Gretel.
Some candy. I'm gonna fatten you up.
Yeah. So the arrival of Padden Fane is always awaited. He brings a lot of goods that the townspeople need, books, sewing trinkets, miscellaneous items like that, kind of like a traveling general store of sorts.
Because he comes every year, and it's the same guy.
Yeah, it's been the same guy for I think as far as Rand can really remember. But so he assembles, with what we would associate with, like country bumpkins, and he acts almost like a gleeman and gives them quote unquote news and stories from the outside world. Little does he know there actually is a world class gleeman in the town whose tattered cloak of many colors he's not even fit to look at in comparison. But so far at this point, all we know of Fane is that he's nothing more than a normal run of the mill peddler with perhaps a love for flair and grandiose.
Or is it just that he wants to be the center of attention? He wants people to think he's important.
I think that's more so, given how he acts through the rest of the series. Fane wants to look important, and he wants you to think that he's important as well.
Right. So after that, um, Winter Night happens, the whole thing. There's an attack, the Trollocs kill people. There's Myrddraw running around, and we already talked about them last week. But Rand's dad, um, Tam, is it Tam? Gets hurt,
That's how I say it.
and he takes him all the way to the village. He carries him basically on a couple of pieces of wood. Drags him all the way to the village through the woods. When he finally reaches the village, he sees Fane's wagon burned to the ground, and Tom expresses regret for the dead from the village, and worst of all, that the poor peddler has disappeared completely, most likely to the inside of a Trolloc cookpot. It would have been for the best if this was what had actually happened. But in reality, he turned coward and ran away from the slaughter that he's responsible for, really. I mean, it's his fault the Trollocs were there. It's his fault people were dying, but he ran away, and they don't really give us an explanation why. But later, in Balaron, when Rand is trying to run away from Min and his destiny, he bumps into an almost unrecognizable Fane, thin, bony, and in clothes that look like a bundle of rags. This is the quote from the book. And I think it's important to note that Fane's physical appearance is starting to change. And as his character progresses through the books, we see him change more and more, not just his clothes, but his outward appearance. But Rand chases him down anyways, and like the naive, bull-headed sheepherder that he is, he tries to help the man he thinks he's known for most of his life. Rand, thinking only with the hair on his chest, lets slip where they're staying, when they are leaving, and who's there. He also tells Master Fane that Moraine is the Aes Sedai. Fane seems more upset that the Trollocs burned his wagon and that it wasn't fair than anything else, and makes Rand promise not to tell Moraine that he's alive.
That's something important to take note of for sure.
Anytime somebody tells you not to, makes you promise not to tell, it's probably a bad thing.
Yeah. Please don't tell the Aes Sedai I'm alive. You can't
Right.
tell her that. She must not know.
And it's really important. I think what you were trying to get at was that he's upset. He's more upset for the loss of his wagon, and that it wasn't fair that they burned it. He was saying things like, "They shouldn't have burned my wagon. Don't they know who I am?"
You know who I am.
like
I'm
like
the
the Trollocs are
Juggernaut,
supposed
bitch.
to respect who he is.
Yeah. So a little further on, when we get towards, in chapters 47 and 49, the party's all together and, again, quote unquote, safe in Fal Dara. And Ignar kind of captures Pad and Fane trying to enter the keep. They discover the suspicious character. I think he was trying to, wasn't he trying to scale the walls or sneak through one of the gates?
Yeah, he was trying to get in. That's
Yeah.
the important part.
And then that's when Moraine and Land go and question him. And it's at this point that Fane reveals that he's been a dark friend for the last 40 years, and he was recruited under the promise of immortality. He also confesses that he was the one that brought all the Trollocs to Edmund's Field, because he covered the Two Rivers area. He was chosen to be the Dark One's hound to search for the Dragon Reborn. 3 years ago in the series, at this point, he was brought to Shal Ghul and met Balsamon, who we later learn is Ishmael, who sent him hunting for the boys, and that a Fade took Fane from, we believe, Baer-Loran on a leash to chase the boys. And at Shadar Logoth, Balsamon was the one who drove the Fades, and by extension the Trollocs, into Shadar Logoth. He was able to follow the boys to Camlin due to his connection to Mordeth and Matt's dagger, and then through the ways, using the same methodology. He was caught by Masham Shin, the Black Wind in the ways. And it seems like, from what I remember reading in the series, that it was like half the wind liked him and half of the wind feared him. But either way, it just kind of left him alone. But we find out that he did not necessarily leave the Black Wind alone. We find out that the Dark One has impressed a part of himself onto Fane, and because of that, he was able to withhold some information from Moraine. And we're assuming it was his encounter with Mordeth, where the two of them merged together. The result being an entity that, while a dark friend, also was driven by its own ends and served its own desires. Fane is now of the Shadow for sure, and has Mordeth's hatred of the Shadow and his overriding motivation to get his dagger back from Matt.
So I think it's important to note that this is where he's been a dark friend for, does it say, is it 40 years? 40 years.
It's been 40 years.
It's starting to break here. He's starting to become, although he's evil, he's not necessarily solely looking out for the Dark One's interests. So he's not necessarily a dark friend in the strictest sense of the word.
Not anymore, because he became a dark friend in his 20s. And according to what I'm reading, Padden Fane was originally from Lugard, or Luggard, however you want to say the word, and was originally just making regular visits to the Two Rivers. And it was that affinity and the focus that was where the Dragon Reborn was going to come from, as the Dark One discovered, that prompted the Shadow to approach Fane.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the chronology there. I'm not sure if he was sworn, if he had sworn the Dark Friend oaths before he was approached by the Dark. It seems like he was a dark friend for a long time, and then the dark one approached him and was like, "Serve me, and I will make you live forever." Like,
Well, when I
who
say like
actually
approached
ever
by the
buys
shadow,
that? Whoever buys that promise? Like, no,
yeah, like
sorry.
when I say approached by the shadow, I mean like made a dark friend to take the dark friend oaths.
Yeah.
So that would
Oh,
have
I see
happened
what you mean.
in his 20s. So yeah, but yeah. So I think that carries us over into the next book, The Great Hunt.
Yeah. So that was the last we saw him of him for the Eye of the World. Is him in the dungeons. And then in the beginning of The Great Hunt, which is the second book of the series, Van Fane is being held in the dungeon at Faldara still. Edwin and um, Rand go to visit. And I think we learned that Edwin has been visiting Van Fane regularly to ask him questions. Um, I think there's a mention by one of the Aes Sedai who comes with the Amerlin later that that she is a little upset that anybody's been allowed to go visit Pan Fane unsupervised. But Edwin and Rand go to visit Fane, and he states that he can feel Rand wherever he is. He can find him. Like, what's that scene from Wedding Crashers? Like, I'll find you.
Oh yeah.
he, he says he can feel Rand wherever he is and gloats that Mordeth knows more than all of you. So I don't know if we mentioned it in the last thing, but it's like he got caught in the fog of Mordeth, and he like merged. They merged together, and so now he's part Mordeth and part Pad Vane. So he kind of has this knowledge from this great evil that's been alive forever, or for a very long time, anyways.
I just thought of an interesting parallel with that. It's not unlike not entirely like, but it's kind of akin to what winds up happening to Rand with Lewis Theron.
Right. He's kind of slowly changed, and to the point where the people themselves can't tell where one consciousness ends and the other one starts. To where at some points Rand is going like, are you, am I crazy? Are you alive? And Lewis Theron's in the back of his mind going, are you crazy? Am I crazy? Am I alive? Like neither of them knows which of the consciousness is dead and which of them is alive. And yeah, I'd lose my mind. I'd go crazy too.
I think one of my favorite parts of that is like, who are you? Who are you?
Who are you? Now my favorite is he's standing in an empty room shouting, I'm not crazy.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, so just before there's an attack on Faldara by Trollocs and at least one Fade that we know of. But just before that attack, Vane is waiting in the dark for Matt and Edwin to come visit. And there's a door that opens, and he's like, "Oh, it's you." And then later we find out that Ingtar, spoilers, and a Fade working together have knocked out Matt and Edwin, and they freed uh, Pat Fane from his cell, which is how you know that Ingtar is a dark friend. But they took the dagger from Matt, and I think do they also take the horn here?
Yeah, that's where they
Or
steal
yeah,
the horn of Valir.
right. Ingtar is the one who was actually able to get into the
I
storage
think it was
room
like a
and take the
storeroom.
horn.
Yeah.
So then they're on the run, going to Toman Head, which is where Flam Flame. I always read it as Flame, but I know that that's not what it is. It's the switched, but
For
it's
me
they're
or
going
something
to
like that.
Flame because that's where all these white cloaks are, and I'm not sure what prompted them to go there. But he leaves a note for Rand that that's where they're going. Um, we talked about this last week, but on the way with the horn and the dagger, Fane fights for control of the band of Trollocs with the Myrddraal, who helped him get out of jail, and he kills it, nailing it to a door in a village. Here we need to make a slight correction from last week, in that he didn't. When I'm reading it again, I note that he didn't actually flay the Myrddraal. He just killed it and nailed it to the door. He has a couple of the Shienaran guards that were dark friends killed and skinned, further cementing his control. And I think that's what I was connecting the two things together.
Because it's actually the two guards that Rand meets when he goes with Egwene to see Pat and Fane. It's those two that have been filleted, skinned alive and hung up. Because whenever Rand sees them, he recognizes them.
I can't remember their names. I didn't write them down.
It's like Changu and I can't remember the other one.
Yeah, it wasn't important when I was doing my show prep for me to write it down.
They're dark friends anyway.
Who cares?
Fuck them. So yeah, then of course further along in the Great Hunt, we kind of get into this very long paced game of kind of hot potato with the dagger and the horn, spans from like chapters 19 to like 45. Fane, I'm assuming because he always sets the dagger on top of the chest that the Horn of Valyr is stored in, and with his connection to Mordeth and Mordeth's linked to the dagger, it's like, a better than ADT alarm system. He even remarks that it's a better deterrent than any guard or anything he could post on it.
Right. He thinks it's so evil that nobody's going to touch it in order to get to the horn underneath.
Well, and what I'm getting at is I think his combining with Mordeth and Mordeth's link to the dagger works as like an alarm for him, because it's not until Rand reaches out and takes the dagger, basically, that Fane awakens with a start and starts, calling the Trollocs to action, saying, they're in the camp, they're stealing, kind of thing. But with Lowell, or is that how you say it, Lowell?
That's how I always read it.
So with Lowell's Ogier strength and Rand's quick work and training from land with his sword, he uses the different stances and is able to fend off Trollocs, while Lowell picks up the chest that contains the Horn of Valyr, and they make their way in the dark away from the camp, because they had actually stumbled upon the camp by mistake. They were expecting to see a fire still going and it had been put out, and they suddenly realized, like, oh shit, there's shapes moving around, and they're being human dark friends with the group actually saves them, because there's a Trolloc that wakes up and he's sniffing around, and it seems like he just assumes that it's the scent from the dark friends that are with them, their future food source, he hopes. The Trolloc does.
Right. Some of that Tarviran luck working out for Rand.
Oh, yeah, as it does so frequently. But they're able to get the Horn of Valyr, and this whole string of events happens, and they make it to Kareen. And it's there that Fane's Legion of Dark Friends steal back the horn and the dagger and set the inn they're staying in, known as, or named the Defender of the Dragon Wall, on fire. He leaves yet another message for Rand, and then Fane takes his restolen goods, the horn and the dagger, and his followers through the ways to Toman Head, heading towards Flame. And that's actually where we find out that a part of Pat and Fane has actually been impressed on the Mashin Shen, or the Black Wind from the Ways, because it actually tries to break out of the ways to get to Rand.
Yeah. And I don't know if that was necessary for the story, or if it was just Robert Jordan saying, you know what, the ways are too convenient. I can't keep using them. So there has to be a reason that Rand can't go through the ways all the time.
Another interesting point is later on, like, this does not happen to Perrin whenever he tries to use the ways. So it's assumed that at this point, Rand is already known to be, at least to the Shadow, the Dragon Reborn. And so it focuses on Rand. It also seems like at this point, all of Padan Fane's hate and compulsion to follow one of the three tavern is focused solely on Rand. He still tries to get at, Perrin and Mat here and there, but more so because they're obstacles rather than the one he seeks. So, Pain, I just like combined his name to just Pain because he's a pain in my ass. But Fane leaves the Dark Friends and the Trogs in a nearby camp, and instead takes the chest with the Horn of Valir to the High Lord Turok in I think it might be Falme. Falme? So the comments are going to tell us one way or the other. Because it looks like Falme.
Turok is one of the Shanchan of the High Blood.
Yeah, that's right.
Important to note.
Yeah. But Turok opens the chest and confiscates the horn and the ruby dagger. And after that, Fane sets himself up in style with, fine clothes and a servant and Falme. And Fane winds up killing Turok's aide, Huan, for striking him. And that's the last we see of him in the Great Hunt. And is still most of what we see in him is still these two books, the first two books of the series. That's where he is around the most.
Yeah, and I think it's because trying to set up this long-running character, and I don't know if he gets somewhat abandoned down the road, or if the fan reaction wasn't what Robert Jordan had hoped for, or if it was just his evolving story, his evolving direction for the story, kind of wrote Padan Fane out of most of this, and he just kind of comes back every once in a while. But the next time we see him is in the Dragon Reborn, the prologue, where Padan Fane is calling himself Orodith, which means wormwood, which I took as another Lord of the Rings reference, as Wormtongue, who was not necessarily Gollum, but he was kind of, a bad advisor, a bad actor who was advising two different kings, I think, or a king and a steward. It's not important. What is important is that at this point, Padan Fane, who's now calling himself Ordith, which means Wormtongue, is advising people who are high up in the White Cloak organization, specifically Pedron Nile, who's is it the Lord Commander of the White Cloaks?
Yeah, he's the Lord Captain Commander of the Children of the Light.
The Lord Captain Commander. We wouldn't want to minimize his role.
Yeah, because he was one of the 5 great captains.
He doesn't do anything but he just sits in his office and tries to scheme stuff up, but he doesn't actually accomplish anything. But he is worming his way into Pedron Nile's good graces. We found he has made his way to Amador, and he has convinced Nile that the Two Rivers is a nest of dark friends. And that probably didn't take much, because White Cloaks will believe that dark friends are everywhere. They're just like, oh, look under a rock. There's a dark friend. Oh, look in the sky. It's a pretty bird. Oh, it's a dark friend.
I don't understand it.
Mom. She's a dark friend.
I don't understand it. Must be dark friends. I just picture like the History Channel aliens guy, but just dark friends.
Right. This was dark friends.
Yeah. And it's interesting because right around the same time, Pedron Nile is not the only one he convinces. He convinces Aleda Duavrini Rohan. Royhan, I think. I can't pronounce these names. I'm so bad. Who was at this point the Amerlin seat. And this convinces Aleda, who was, of course, of the Red Aja, to oppose Rand as well.
Right.
Yeah. Because another marker of him moving into Ordis. It's Ordis. Right. Yeah, because the N is kind of pronounced like Keys. is
He's kind of whispering into people's ears, and
yeah, he changes from like trying to just force things to like kind of I'm just going to manipulate things to do what I want. No, like the aide to the was it the King of Gondor from Lord of the Rings that like he corrupts him and taints the king.
the King of Gondor.
Yeah, wasn't it the King of Gondor? The
Oh,
one that why can I not remember his name? Lord of the Rings version of Gandalf, not Lord of the Rings version. The Gandalf the White cleanses him and casts his aide out because his aide was actually working for
horse,
like Saruman.
the king of the horse people,
Yeah,
kind of
Rohan. Yeah, the King of Rohan.
the riders of Rohan.
Yeah,
That's who it is.
y'all know who we're
Although
talking about.
this is not a podcast about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there's just a lot of good parallels, and a lot of people have watched the Lord of the Rings. So if you haven't,
Right.
if you're listening and you haven't read it,
And I think that it's been admitted that Robert Jordan's work was influenced by the Lord of the Rings.
oh yeah, my essays in college, in high school, were influenced by Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So with that white cloak or children of the light, as Lord Bear, I'm sure would like to hear it referenced, since white cloaks is more of like not really derogatory, but like slang, I guess.
Right. It's almost like a dirty
Yeah.
word.
Dirty, dirty word.
Dirty word.
But calling back to that, we move on to the Shadow Rising book. This happens over the course of four main chapters, chapter 1, 31, 45, and 56, where Ordeath leads 50 White Cloaks to the Two Rivers and meets Dane Bornhald there. And he intends to scour the two rivers to entice Rand to come to him. However, Perrin's parents laugh at him, and then Fane murders the entire family. Foreshadowing.
Shit.
Remember the last time in the Eye of the World where we saw Perrin lose his shit, black out, and killed two White Cloaks and didn't even remember he did it?
Right. They had to,
And that was just because they killed
afterwards.
yeah, because they killed Hopper.
Hopper.
They killed a wolf that he had just met.
R.I.P. Hopper.
And now Fane just murdered Perrin's family in his home. So Fane, he sets up his own camp with his close followers. He has a Fade or a Murdral prisoner. And he knows one of the boys is to the south and that it's not Rand. So he still has that connection where he can sense where the three Taviran are. But he knows it's not Rand. But it doesn't indicate that he knows exactly who it is. So Fane orchestrates. Go ahead.
And guess that it's Matt. If it's not Rand, and if Perrin is there in the Two Rivers.
Oh yeah, that's fair
probably
enough.
Matt.
That is fair enough. But so Fane orchestrates a Trolloc attack that wipes out Terran Ferry, but allows many to escape across the river, carrying word of what is going on in the two rivers. Then Fane watches the defense of Edmund's Field, which is orchestrated by Perrin. And he gets angry at the result and plans to take his motley crew to Camlin and then to Tar Valon. But it is at Two Rivers under Fane's orchestrated Trolloc and I think the initial White Cloak attack. Yeah, it was the initial White Cloak attack that Perrin comes in, sets up the defense, and this is where we see Perrin rise to the kind of moniker of Lord Golden Eyes of the Two Rivers. And this breaking is what breaks Padan Fane of his White Cloak affiliation. His defeat there puts him in such bad graces with Pedro and Nio that that breaks his usefulness to the Children of the Light. And I believe they even name him Dark Friend.
Yeah.
Seeing the way he manipulated him, kind of wormed his way into their graces.
And he has some White Cloak followers after that for a while, but I don't think they wear the White Cloak anymore unless he tells them to.
Yeah, I believe so. And then he resorts back to the Trollocs. Perrin's already working and establishing this strong militia-style regiment that is able to defend and thwart off the attack once again. And seeing that he's not going to get through with what he has, knowing, I think even at this point, that his sway with the Shadow, with the Dark Friend side, is kind of in question, because he's doing more of his own thing rather than what the Dark One has ordered him to. That's when he takes what's left of his forces and sets off for Camlin and then ultimately to Tar Valon. And actually, at that point, I guess he had not yet convinced Aleda to be against Rand. Looking at our notes, it seems like it does happen later.
Right, because that's where what happens next is when he gets to Tar Valon in the Fires of Heaven. Some of it is in the prologue and some of it is in chapter 19. But Fane meets with Alida and talks about Rand, and she's really hungry for any news about Rand. She thinks it's her job to like capture him and keep him safe for the last battle. Fane just wants to kill him, and it's really these two chapters really drove home to me how much he was in the moment switching back and forth between different accents and different mannerisms depending on his mood and what he was feeling. When he's talking to Elida, he notices there's this tension between her and Alviren, who's her keeper of the chronicles, and it makes him happy. He's like, oh, I really, it's like kind of juices him up, that tension between her, and I think that's the connection back to Mordeth and the Shadar Logoth, that kind of living off of tension and suspicion, and he's really there for the horn and the dagger. He's not there to help Elida, even though I think he does a little bit. He gives her good information about Rand and other people who he calls dark friends, who are really good people. But he steals the ruby dagger, and Alviren confronts him, but he's able to convince her that he's a high-level dark friend, and then he quickly leaves. But there's, I think, was our first really telling moment of which of the two of them, Elida and Alviren, was actually the dark friend or Black Aja, and which of them was just an idiot. You know, because up to this point, it's like we knew one of them was a dark friend or Black Aja, and it was like whoever the other one is must just be some idiot Red who doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah, because I think it's widely believed that at this point, well, after he reclaims the ruby dagger, that he's very likely insane and is even wanted by the Shadow. Because they send Slayer
like
after him, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And just like Rand at the beginning of the books is they want to capture him so they can turn him, and towards the end, at some point they're like, well, the bounty is out, just kill the sucker. That's what they've done to Fane. It's like at first they want to use him, and then they want to capture him so they can scoop out his brains and distill them and put them back, whatever that means. And then eventually they just want to kill him.
Yeah, because Slayer, I think, actually tries to kill Padan Fane back when he was still in the Two Rivers, but Perrin intervenes.
Unknowingly. Perrin's just trying to take Slayer out because he's killing all the wolves around the Two Rivers.
Yeah. Which he doesn't know at first, because whenever Slayer first appears, he goes by Lord Luke, Luc, and says that he's a hunter of the horn and he's trying to help the Two Rivers people.
In the real world, that's his cover.
Yeah, and he's like constantly undermining Perrin and all that, but that can potentially be another story or another podcast. So leaving off of the White Tower, we find ourselves again, not again, but we find ourselves in Lord of Chaos book, kind of chapters 26, 28. The setting, of course, is Camlin, and Fane sends some of his white cloaks. So there's the affirmation that he does still have white cloak followers. He sends them to attack Rand as a test of Rand's defenses. Later, Fane and his pet Fade are staying with the Dark Friend family in Camelin. The son of the family, Perwyn Bellman, brings Fane news that Rand was attacked by a gray man. And this makes Fane absolutely furious because he wants Rand all for himself.
Right. I think the attack on Rand was thwarted by Davram Bashir's men. They were training for something. And they're like, oh, look, we caught these dirty, dirty white cloaks. Dirty, literally. They were covered in dirt, which is what clues you into the fact that they belong to Pat and Fane and not to the Hall of Justice and Light or whatever they call it. But then we see Fane again in Crown of Swords, which is I'm kind of sensing this pattern that he just gives him 2 chapters a book now.
Yeah,
It's like
it seems like.
he was getting like 10 or 15 chapters, and now he's getting like 2, just 2 chapters.
Yeah, but we find out that
and
like a lot of his kind of like backhanded manipulating has had like more widespread effects. So he
Right.
like in the like kind of background behind production gets more chapters because of what he's done.
Yeah, if you look at the effect that he's having, the ripples, he's getting a lot of things done, but you don't actually get to see him or talk to him.
Like a plot device.
Very, very rarely. Like in A Crown of Swords, we see that he's an advisor to Toram Ryatin in the Karahian rebel camp, and he now calls himself Geral Mordeth, which is another step even more towards accepting his Mordeth side that he picked up in book 1. Rand spots him, but he disappears into the crowd. There's this whole thing where they're kind of playing the game of houses inside of this big tent full of nobles and rebels, and I'm waving my hand around like you can see me, right? But you can't. And he tells some people not to trust that man, whatever he's calling himself. He means Pen Fane, but he's pointing to this guy Geral Mordeth. And after a little while, everything goes to shit. A bubble of evil appears, and everybody starts running and freaking out. It's like a Godzilla movie. It's like, holy shit, Godzilla's coming. Everybody run. And I'm pretty sure that this fog didn't come from Fane. Some people have that fan theory that it's the same as the fog in what's the name of that city? I've lost it now.
Logos?
Yeah, Shadar Logoth. They say it's the same as the fog. I don't think so. I think it's just like a thick fog that popped up as one of these bubbles of evil that bubbles up around Rand and Matt and Perrin to some extent as Tarviran.
Oh, I think it might be because we're seeing Fane go through this from Dark Friend to combination of Mordeth and Fane, and he's constantly growing more closer and closer towards Mordeth. And as we get into what happens, in Towers of Midnight that we'll get to here shortly, I think it might be, but it's like a very weak manifestation.
Well, I think there's definitely an argument to be made that Pen Fane is causing this fog, and there's some evil things happening. People are dying. People are getting ripped in half, chopped in half, just like sucked out of nowhere, and they're all running. Rand has this little group together. I think him and Min and some of the other nobles, and one of the Aes Sedai, and they're all running. I think Cadsuane. And they're running, and Fane jumps out from out of nowhere in the fog and slices Rand with the ruby dagger across that other wound that he already has that won't heal, that nobody can seem to heal, and gives him another wound on top of it, and then runs away laughing like, haha. Like,
I don't think it's
he,
Katsuane yet, because it's one of the Yellow Sisters, Samitsu Tamagawa, and one of the Oshmen at this point, Demir Flynn, that do the attempt to heal the wound left by the ruby dagger. So I think it
right,
was
but
her.
I'm pretty sure Katsuin was part of the party.
Yeah, I think she was, but I think she might have been off fighting the others. Who knows?
Right.
I haven't reread that book yet. I'm halfway
When
through
I
rereading Great Hunt.
when I read Katsuin, she reads like the teacher from Magic School Bus for me.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that's what I think of.
I'm on the magic school bus. Oh, man. Which, of course, the wound now from the ruby dagger completes another one of the prophecies from the Corinthian cycle. So that is yet another prophecy that Rand just happened to fulfill, like he often does.
Yeah, some of them he's done on purpose because he read
Yeah.
the all the prophecies and he got his hands on everything he could, and he tried purposefully to fulfill the prophecies to make sure.
Like we see with like the Stone of Tyr and
Right.
the sword that cannot be touched,
Any
that he
place where he can
touches.
exert influence over the events, he does.
Yeah.
But other places like this, it's just happens.
So from Crown of Swords, the next time we really see Fane is in Winter's Heart. This time he gets apparently 3 chapters.
Right. Well, it
Yeah,
makes up for the fact that he took a whole book off.
that's fair enough. Fair enough. He gets 1 chapter to make up for the books he just left off. So we see him in chapters 22, 32, and 33. He brings Taram Raitan, or Riatan, with him to Far Madding. And on arrival, he kills Kisman, or one of the Ashaman that was ordered by Mazrim Tain to kill Rand, with the ruby dagger. Again, because Rand is his. This dude is like not so secret admirer obsessed.
Right.
Like he's the one that sends celebrities pictures of like him outside their window watching them change. Like that level creepy.
Right. With little cutout letters from magazines like,
Yeah, I love you,
I
love me
see
back, or
you.
I'll stab you with my ruby dagger.
Our love is eternal.
Which now that I've said it in that context, it sounds like just dirty, like beyond the taint on the dagger. Oh God,
Beyond.
I'm gonna use it from now on. I'm gonna stab you with my ruby dagger.
And it's taint.
Yeah, makes it sound like you don't wash. Anyway, Fane sends a note to Rand telling him that Gedwin and Torval, the 2 remaining Oshaman assassins, are staying in a house on Blue Carp Street. Fane ultimately winds up killing Gedwin and Torval and then attacks Rand. And he uses his new powers to create an illusion, but when Rand slashes him with a sword, Fane flees. The powers mentioned here are confirmed in a Knife of Dreams signing tour, where, according to Robert Jordan, Fane has the ability to create illusions from the recent past. And here it is used to distract Rand with a vision of Gedwin and Torval, who had recently died at Fane's hand. Like we saw this previously in the Great Hunt, chapter 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're chasing Rand and the whole group, Ingtar's group. They're chasing Pat and Fane. And they come to an abandoned village, and Rand walks in, and there's this whole scene where there's an empty table with a bowl on it, and all of a sudden he can see all of the people who used to live in the house, and there's food in the bowl and some flies, and then everybody dies, and then it just keeps repeating over and over and over, and there's more and more flies every time, and it's just a little more and more scary every time.
I did
And
not make that connection at all.
well, I didn't either the first time, and doing the research for this, I found that interview, and it kind of leads me to an important side note, and it's that there are some people who think if you don't read it in the books, it's not true, it's not canon. And then there's some people like me who I'm like, if Robert Jordan said it, this is true in an interview, then it's clearly true. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, I can. My thing is, if the author confirms it, then it is canon because the author knows the intent behind the writings.
Okay.
So I would say that if Robert Jordan is saying, yeah, this is an example of Fane's power growing, this is that illusion power held back then. I think I would love to have more explanation as to how he was able to make it residual.
Well, and he wasn't able to hold on to it for very long
Yeah.
because as soon as Rand tries to embrace the void, which is something he had been scared of until this point, the vision goes away. Um, and then in Farmatting, as soon as he like cuts through with his sword to try and um, either to try and kill the vision or to kill Fane. I'm not sure which, but he also like dispels the vision by cutting through it with his sword, which I mean he might have been embracing the void at that point too. I'm not sure.
True, because from what I'm reading here too, Robert Jordan has also confirmed rumors suggesting that Pattern Fame may be something entirely new, an entity or amalgamation that has never before been seen in the pattern. So it would make
Right.
sense that he has some, new powers that we don't know the mechanics of or the limits of. Because
Right.
Robert Jordan also confirmed that the destruction of Shadar Logoth did not affect Fame.
Right. And we see there are some types of magic or types of powers that aren't connected to the one source or the dark one's true source.
Yeah, that's true because that's Min's
Min's
ability to see
vision,
like auras. Perrin's, yeah, his connection with the wolves. I would even say Matt's incredibly high luck, which hails me to watching Deadpool 2. Luck's not a superpower. Yes, it is.
well, the fan theory there is that um, way back in the Eye of the World, there's a point where Ishamael is calling himself Baalzamon and he's visiting all three of them in their dreams. And he offers Rand a cup, and Rand denies him and kind of throws it back in his face almost. But the fan theory is that Matt drank the cup or drank from the cup, and that's where his luck comes from.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I don't have any kind of research done today to back that up. I don't have a chapter for you to look at or anything, but that's the fan theory that I've been seeing everywhere.
We can say that. We'll be talking about Matt at some point, I guarantee.
As long as we can, as long as we can say right now that it's a theory and not what actually happened.
Yeah.
But the next time we see Fane is in the prologue for Towers of Midnight, and we're getting awfully close to the end of the series here. And Fane has become like a completely different thing from the beginning of the series. You see him walking through the blight basically by himself, carrying the ruby dagger. The sky is all black, and the only emotion he has left is hatred for Rand and the Dark One. And he keeps cutting himself with the blade, but he doesn't care. And it says he was once Fane, once more death, but he needs a new name now. He just finished killing a worm, which are freaking huge, right? These things are huge, and I think the only weapon he has is the dagger. So it means that
With.
he's the worm with the dagger.
Yeah. Which is a testament to his power that he's become so dangerous that he can kill. The text I'm reading is Jumara, which is a term for shadow spawn, specifically the worm. But yeah, he does kill it with just his dagger.
Right. And he's thinking to himself, the worms make a lot of noise when they die. So he hopes any Trollocs nearby will send scouts to investigate. He wants to be found by the Trollocs. Sure enough, a group of Trollocs led by Myrddraal appear, A mist comes out of the ground and it kills the Fade and turns the Trollocs into zombies. Fade no longer hunts Rand. He plans to meet him at Shao Ghul and kill him. He made zombies. Trolloc
Masha,
zombies.
with Mashadar, which is that tendril kind of smoke thing that we see in Shudder Logoth that Mordeth controlled.
Yeah, in my mind, it kind of comes out and like little tendrils of it come up and like shoot into their noses, and their eyes turn red, and they're just like brains.
Like an ethereal tentacle monster.
Oh no!
Shut up! No, we're not going there. I've seen enough anime to know where this is going.
Oh, it's not that kind of show.
I mean, for the way Fane or Gerald Mordeth, as he's known now, acts, it might be that kind of show for him. He is insane and almost inhumanly psychotic.
Yeah.
I mean, just walk around like, I'm gonna just cut myself with this dagger. Ooh, it feels good. It's like, excuse me, sir, stop.
Yeah.
Get some help.
There's that picture of him. It's somebody drew it, and it's him holding the dagger and like licking the cutting edge with his tongue.
Oh yeah.
That gives me shivers every time.
It was done by Seamus Gallagher.
Yeah. Gallagher?
Yeah, Seamus Gallagher. So I just happen to be looking at it right now. It's featured on the WOTWiki.com page on Pad and Fane.
That's where I saw it.
Yeah. Some interesting artwork for him. I don't really like the artwork they did for Ordees because it makes him just look like a kind of chubby old man.
Right. I wish they had the same person do all the artwork.
Yeah, I really like the one that's in the companion, the one that tweeted out with the podcast.
Yeah,
Twitter.
that's the one that looks the most like Gollum, I think.
Yeah, because that one is illustrated by Paul Bielaczyk. Bielaczyc. That is the last name I cannot pronounce. We all know I'm hopeless with pronunciation.
Right. So moving on to A Memory of Light.
Yes. So we see him in chapter 45. As we know, Pad and Fane has decided he's not going to hunt Rand. He's just going to wait for Rand to come to him at Shao Ghul. So it's clear at this point that Pad and Fane, Ordees, Gerald Mordeth, whichever alias you choose to remember him as, we're going to choose Pad and Fane for continuity. Well, actually, he changes his name.
Something different.
Yeah. But he's no longer serving the light of the shadow and takes joy in watching his enemies kill each other. And it's at this point that we find out that he is now calling himself Shizam. Shizam?
Shazam.
Yeah, I don't want to do Shazam. Shizam. Shizam is what I'm going to go for because it sounds like Shiza. Right. For those of you that don't speak German, that's German for shit. Which is what I think every time I see Pad and Fane pop up. Shit! But Fane is now just seen as a body that this entity inhabits. In reality, he is the mist that we see rolling across the battlefield there in Thakandar. He's able to spread Mashadar by consuming the souls of Trollocs and men. And at this point appears to believe that Fane is actually his only weakness and believes that he can eliminate Fane as soon as he reestablishes himself at a new location, just as he had done in Shadar Logoth, which holds that this is really no longer Pad and Fane, that this is more so the pure embodiment of what had essentially destroyed Shadar Logoth, that is given itself a name as Shizam. But the Trollocs that he corrupts with this mist going through Thakandar fight other Trollocs, they fight the forces of light, and everyone the mist touches fights for Pad and Fane or Shizam's own personal cause. However, the Trollocs are only a distraction because Fane and Shizam both want Rand, and they feel that after taking down Rand, that the world will be theirs.
And not having read that chapter myself, do you think he means that if he takes Rand, like if he takes over Rand's body, then he'll have his power and the world, he can control the world, or if he kills Rand, then he has some kind of misguided notion that the world's going to be theirs. I don't know. I mean, the way I read it, it could be both ways, but I haven't actually read that far into the series yet. I'm doing this show. I'm spoiling everything for myself just for you guys, just so you know.
Personally, I think I lend more to the. I think that Shizam at this point, Padan Fane, would see his use of Mashadar, the mist, as his way of dominating and conquering his foes, as he's doing with the Trollocs, the forces of light at will, and seemingly delighting in it. I think he thinks that if he can take over Rand in the same way, then in addition to his own power, which he, being insane and psychotic, surely believes outmatches anyone's power, that in combination with Rand's power, since Rand, the Dragon Reborn, is foretold to be able to defeat the Dark One, I think he sees this as, well, if I can take over the Dragon Reborn, A, I'm stronger than him, and B, I can use his power, not really have to do extra work on my own, and just use him however I want. And with him under my control, who can defeat me?
Right. Kind of like he thinks he's going to add Rand to his army of Trolloc zombies.
Because it kind of hints that he wants to reestablish himself in a new location, which makes me think that ultimately Shizam, Mordeth, and Mashadar is dependent on a host location. And we see Fane's body deteriorating over the series after he is combined with Mordeth.
Right.
So I think that points to maybe his plan is to take Rand, seal the Dark One away, and just make Shal Ghul a new Shatter Logoth as the seat of power, and maybe even feed on the Dark One as a new source of continuing power and dominance over the world. Because imagine if the Dark One is the only one with access to the true source, and he takes over the Dark One and gets access to the true source, how far can he extend Mashdar and consume everyone in the world?
Right. And in his twisted mind, he thought it was a reality.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to take over the Dark One. I don't know. So he's thinking of himself as a new person, as Shizam. I think he sees Rand across the battlefield, and he moves towards him, and he stops as some of the mist that's now part of him stopped sensing. He comes across what he believes to be a familiar corpse killed by the mists, but it reaches up and grabs him by the throat. Matt, spoilers, tells him once he heard that if you catch a disease and survive, you can't get it again. Fane, surprised, drops the dagger, and Matt grabs it, ramming it through his heart. Fane dies, his corpse melting away. This is the last time we see Fane at all in the series, and I read it like he's dead. But there's some other people out there who are like, no, he's just melted away, and he's completely made up of mist now, and he can come back wherever he wants to. But I don't know.
I don't know. I think that's dependent on if Shizam at this point, Mashdar, Mordeth, was able to basically take the grounds of Thakandar and make it his new host, his new reestablishment, or not. And given the extent of effort that he's exerted, I don't know, but he's also consumed a lot of people and a lot of Trollocs.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
I mean, if he just melts away into mist, Fane, as we know Fane, well, I say as we know Fane, the body of Fane, I think, is 100% for sure dead. So Padan Fane, I would argue, is 100% dead. But, hauling back to the Eye of the World, Moraine says that there's nothing that can kill Mashadar. So I think it just depends.
the host part of Mordeth is Mashadar,
Yeah.
right?
Which, I mean, with the Dark One being sealed away, a fresh seal, his powers weakened, which means his power over Shao Ghul and Thakandar has weakened. We don't really know, which raises an interesting question. What happens after this? Does Mashadar become meshed with the Dark One? Because if he did in fact die, and the Dark One has control over death to an extent, does he still have enough of that control to where he can kind of keep Mashadar and could eventually use it against the next Dragon Reborn or the next Forces of Light to try to rebuild his prison? Because the way it seems to work with the turning of the wheel is that he will continuously try to break out, and he will continuously, if they succeed, be resealed. So has Matt killing him now given the Dark One a whole new tool for the future generations and the ages to come to overcome?
It's possible. I mean, I was just looking at some fan theories about, who our main characters might be in the next age and whether or not they might be good or evil or like crazy shit. Like, okay, if Rand, if the next Dragon Reborn is a reincarnation of Rand, is Rand stuck in that guy's head? Is Elaine the new Lanfear? Like, crazy stuff. There's some crazy fan theories out there, and I want to hear them all. I don't know about you, but I want to hear them all. And I think that Twitter is a great place to do it because you can get feedback from other people, not just us.
Yeah. So what do you guys
But
think? Is Mashadar still alive? Is Padden Fane by extension still alive, or what Fane has become? Or do you think it's gone for good?
find us at Black Tower Pod or at Tower Podcast on Twitter, or you could send us an email. It's blacktowerpod@gmail.com. Let us know. And we actually started doing a new thing last week, and then this week also we started doing our midweek reaction series, which it's all based off of feedback from people who listened and sent in tweets on Twitter or emails, or people who might happen to know us send us text messages,
Or Facebook?
or Facebook. There's Facebook out there too. Just search for the Black Tower. There's all kinds of ways to get in touch with us. And those are the things that we based that midweek reaction series on. And I think Andrew's going to be doing the follow-up episode for this week. I did the one that just released this last Wednesday, and Andrew did the one before that. If you can see the pattern, it's just every other week, and we're just taking a couple minutes out of our day to respond to what people had to say about the show and what people thought. Maybe even make corrections to the horrible, awful job that we did pronouncing things.
Oh man, yeah. I try to correct, and if we get something mixed up with timeline, like I did earlier about when Padden Fane actually spoke with Alita, if I recognize it then, I'll try to correct it then. And I encourage Aaron, of course, to correct me if he notices, like, hey, no, that doesn't happen yet. Like, feel free to be like, hey, no, it didn't happen yet. And I'm like, yeah, because it has been a while since I read the entire series, and this reread is taking longer than I expected already.
Where are you in your reread?
I am like almost 400 pages into The Great Hunt now. I was able to spend time sitting there reading, so I'm trying to.
So you're moving right along. That's not a bad pace. Knowing where you were the last time I talked to you.
Yeah, well, I didn't really get to read that much for a week because of school and everything. So,
right.
Luckily, I'm a fast reader.
And if you've read it all before, I think it sinks in quicker.
Yeah, and I'm seeing things now, and I'm like, oh, that's important later, and I didn't realize it.
Right.
It's fun. It's fun.
I'm actually working on this chapters where they're in Farm Adding in Winter's Heart, and everybody's just kind of converging. Like Rand ran away to formatting, and it's like one by one, all the important people are kind of converging there because everybody just follows Rand around.
You know what you have to do then, right? You have to
What?
take a page out of Balzamon's book, and you're going to have to distill your memories so that you don't remember this podcast
Sure.
or the research you've done. So it might slowly make you insane and make you have an obsession for 3 young boys in a backwoods, but you won't spoil the rest of the book for you.
Please no. No. I'm just going to take my memories of this podcast, lock them in a box, throw away the key, and then take that box and bury it in the ocean.
Ocean of Sidon called the Eye of the World. Really an ocean.
Right.
It was like a small pond, but
it was a pool. It was like a pool.
It was like a kiddie pool. The best kiddie pool.
But it was untainted Sidon.
It was innocent. It was an innocent kiddie pool, and they made it something horrible.
It was a little blow up kiddie pool with like,
can you imagine that
SpongeBob characters on it,
like one of like the Dollar General, like dollar store cheap plastic pools, and it's just like filled to the brim with like this pure male side power, no taint. It's like the cheapest thing in the world to house like something that powerful.
We should sell cans of it. Like you can get cans of Monster at the store in like a white can with no sugar in it. It's like cans of Sidon, no taint.
It's like the kiddie pool of power.
Taint free.
100% guaranteed taint free.
Ooh.
Brought to you by the Black Tower.
Not available anywhere.
Yeah. Funny if like that turned up one day. Like, what if that was a drink that came out of like the series being made with by Amazon and Sony? Like you could buy it real time.
I would buy it. I would buy it.
Like that's how they like
taint-free energy drinks.
They sponsor it with Monster. It's like Sidon for the strong, controlling man in you, or Sidear for the graceful woman in you, not to play into gender stereotypes.
If anyone at Amazon Studios is listening, call me. I have ideas.
I like it. But I think that pretty much wraps up our podcast on Paden Fane / pick one of his aliases.
Right. More aliases than Jason Bourne.
Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne. And he stabbed me in the heart with a ruby dagger.
Oh.
What did our note say? Oh yeah, the dankest of dark friends.
Yeah. Paden Fane is the dankest of dark friends.
Yeah. He's evil and disgusting and greasy, but he's kind of like, minus the evil, he's badass. I mean,
he certainly survived the entire series, which is what more than we can say for most of the dark friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even most of the accepted or the chosen. I mean,
the Forsaken?
The Forsaken.
Yeah, because I think I think they do get called the Accepted too, or the Chosen. I think it's just a White Tower thing.
Yeah, I flubbed there. I've had about 3 fingers of whiskey in the last hour.
A finger is a measurement?
You don't use finger as a measurement of whiskey?
I don't. I just pour in a cup and drink.
Dude, you know what I'm talking about though, right?
It's escaping me right now. I feel
like
so dumb.
If you put your finger up next to the side of the glass, once it gets to the top of that finger, that's 1 finger of whiskey, and it's generally the same amount as a drink.
So you mean like
quote, unquote,
your finger like up and down along the side of the glass, or like
no, sideways?
Sideways. So you only fill it up to like the top of the finger?
Yeah.
This is like a little tiny splash.
What's a big cup? No, so I filled it up 3 fingers tall.
Oh, okay. So you measured it with 3 fingers on the side of the glass.
Yeah. Each finger is about 1.5 ounces.
I did not know that. Now,
bartenders out there, if you're listening, make sure Andrew knows what he's talking about.
I appreciate the knowledge.
All right. But that is all the time we have for today. It's been about 1 hour and 15 minutes, so we have to go.
Yeah, sadly.
For both of us here at the Black Tower, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Andrew.
And walk in the light.
Unless you're Paden Fane.
Then just die.